The light within the grand nexus chamber of the Cygnian hegemony was not generated. It was harvested. It dripped from the colossal, obsidian-veined arches that formed the dome, refracting through the suspended crystalline matrices that housed the wisdom of 10 millennia. This illumination was a perpetual twilight, respectful of the solemnity required for matters touching upon the survival of established order. Below this vast, silent cathedral of governance, the conclave of sovereigns sat upon thrones carved from solidified stellar dust, their collective attention fixed upon the primary holographic projection which shimmered with the chaotic data streams of the newly designated threat vector. Sol 3. The air, thick with processed ozone and the faint, musky scent of ancient governance, crackled with barely contained anxiety. Prime Arbiter Cathar, his chitinous carapace reflecting the dim, purple light like polished granite, leaned forward, the subtle grinding of his numerous joints the loudest sound in the chamber. His mandated concern was palpable. The very foundation of hegemonic stability trembled under the unknown quantity presented by the species designated Homo sapiens. The reports remain fragmented, insufficient, Cathar articulated, his vocalizations resonating through the chamber's acoustic dampeners, a sound like stones tumbling down a deep shaft. They appeared in the peripheral zones of the outer reach, not through conventional jump space corridors, but elsewhere. Their vessels defy established metrics of propulsion efficiency. They move too fast for their apparent energy signature, yet they do not generate the telltale distortion waves of full-spectrum spatial displacement. It is an anomaly that should not exist within the known parameters of universal mechanics. Viceroy Xylos of the Outer Sept shifted uncomfortably on his dais, his multifaceted eyes narrowing into predatory slits. Xylos represented the militaristic element, the faction demanding immediate, overwhelming application of force against any perceived infringement upon hegemonic territory. Arbiter, the anomaly, is irrelevant. They trespass. Their small contingent of scout vessels, crude though they may be in their geometric shaping, reminiscent of discarded infant constructs, has violated the stasis line established during the Great Expansion. We have possessed superior kinetic potential for 3 cycles. Logic dictates preemption. Delay is perceived as weakness, and weakness invites predation. A low, mournful hum emanated from the far end of the chamber, where the philosophical caste held its reserved positions. This was the voice of the arch-synthesist, Elara, whose species viewed conflict as a failure of cognitive synchronization. Viceroy, your instinct is a predictable relic of obsolete cycles. Preemption against an unknown variable yields only unknown consequences. Have we deciphered their intent? Their communication attempts, the crude sonic patterns overlaid with complex mathematical sequences, suggest organization, yet the sheer audacity of their entry suggests either profound ignorance or unfathomable confidence. We must analyze the core psychological substrate before we unleash the forge. A species that breaches the established fabric of intergalactic navigation without recourse to known physics may possess knowledge we have deliberately quarantined. Cathar steepled his primary manipulators, the movement deliberate, rehearsed over millennia of diplomacy. Indeed, synthesist, the data concerning their home world, Sol 3, is equally perplexing. A Class M biosphere of excessive volatility, prone to systemic environmental collapse, yet capable of supporting such rapid technological ascent. Their history is a constant cycle of self-inflicted trauma, yet they possess the drive, the ferocity, to overcome internal dissonance and project themselves beyond their cradle in such a short span. They are a dissonance in the universal harmony. The tension in the chamber tightened further as the sensory monitors flickered, displaying a schematic of the human contingent now held in stasis containment near the hegemony's primary listening post in the Seraphim Nebula. There were only 3 vessels, dwarfed by the nearest hegemonic defense platform, which resembled a frozen comet the size of a small moon. The human ships were utilitarian, blunt, lacking the elegant symmetry favored by established interstellar powers. They looked heavy, grounded in a materiality the hegemony had long transcended. Their weaponry, Xylos scoffed, activating a localized display focusing on the captured schematics of the human primary energy projectors. Crude pulsed energy matrices, inefficient thermal discharge. Their shielding technology is based on localized field manipulation, a rudimentary concept abandoned by the lesser species before the first unification. We could neutralize their entire contingent before their firing solutions could even stabilize. And yet, Alara countered softly, her voice barely audible over the ambient thrum of the chamber. They held their position. When our enforcement cruisers moved to establish quarantine parameters, the human vessels executed a tactical maneuver that bypassed 3 layers of our kinetic suppression fields simultaneously. It was not speed, it was prediction. They moved where our field projections were about to be, not where they currently were. That suggests a level of predictive computation that rivals our own 4th-generation chronometers. Cathar allowed a heavy silence to settle, the weight of expectation pressing upon him. He recalled the first intercepted transmission, a burst of modulated electromagnetic radiation saturated with complex linguistic structures that defied immediate decryption, yet carried an unmistakable tone, not pleading, not aggressive, but expectant. We cannot afford miscalculation. If we treat them as primitives, and they possess the computational advantage we suspect, we risk provoking an asymmetric response that could unravel decades of careful hegemonic expansion. Their unpredictable origin point suggests they operate outside the established rules of engagement codified by the elder races. We are dealing with a biological anomaly masquerading as a strategic threat. What is the proposal for the initial contact phase? Xylos's posture stiffened, radiating thinly veiled contempt. Containment and interrogation, they are isolated. Their primary vessel, the one designated Odyssey, is inert. We extract the command structure. We apply standardized pressure sequences until the required data, their strategic goals, their technological secrets, their breach vector, is obtained. If they resist, we terminate the local threat and analyze the wreckage. This preserves the political narrative, trespassers eliminated. Alara's light receptors dimmed slightly, a sign of profound ethical conflict. Viceroy, that path leads to the very chaos you claim to abhor. If they are indeed possessing superior predictive capacity, subjecting them to blunt coercion will only confirm their worst expectations of us. We must approach this with measured intellectual curiosity. We must treat them as peers, at least superficially, to gauge their reaction to structured diplomacy. Our long-term security rests not on crushing them, but on understanding why they chose this dangerous path. Cathar raised a single, segmented hand, silencing the escalating tension between the 2 powerful delegates. The resolution shall be balanced. We will extend a formal, non-hostile parley invitation. We will not dismantle their vessels. We will not apply direct coercion. We will allow a delegation to emerge from the Odyssey and enter the Nexus station under high observation. Viceroy Xylos, your tactical teams will maintain absolute readiness, cloaked, but positioned to neutralize any sudden movement. Synthesist Alara, your linguistic analysts will prepare the universal translation matrices. We observe, we listen, and we prepare for the very real possibility that we are about to meet something truly new. The projection showing the human vessel dimmed, replaced by the imposing architecture of the Nexus station's primary docking plenum. It was a vast, sterile space, designed to accommodate ships the size of minor moons, now made to feel unnervingly empty by the presence of the small, 3-ship human formation nestled against the docking clamps. The air within the plenum was cycled to standard hegemonic atmospheric composition, slightly heavier nitrogen blend, warmer temperature, a deliberate environmental challenge to any unexpected biochemistry. Minutes stretched into an age. The silence of the chamber above was mirrored by the vacuum of potential within the docking bay. Then the data stream confirmed. The primary vessel, the Odyssey, was venting its atmosphere in a controlled sequence. A ramp, surprisingly low-tech in its exposed mechanical structure, descended from the human hull, spilling an unsettlingly bright, unfiltered white light onto the dark docking floor. The first figure emerged. It was unexpected in its biological simplicity. Bipedal, bilateral symmetry, covered in flexible organic integument rather than the hardened exoskeletons or energy-sheathed bodies typical of advanced species. It moved with a fluid, almost disconcerting lack of mechanical reliance. It was followed by 2 others, identically formed. They carried no visible weaponry, though the sensor sweep indicated complex, integrated communication and life support apparatus subtly woven into their coverings. They projected an aura of profound stillness, an almost unnatural calm that immediately contradicted the hegemony's preliminary psychological profiling, which had predicted frantic aggression or desperate pleading. Cathar watched the live feed, his internal processors struggling to reconcile the visual data with the required threat assessment matrices. or biological structure. It suggests fragility, low internal energy density. Why would a species of such apparent vulnerability possess the capability to violate established sector barriers? Alara's voice, filtered through the chamber speakers, was laced with sudden analytical excitement. Arbiter, observe their gait. It is not the careful testing of an unknown environment. It is proprietorial. They walk as if they belong there. Furthermore, their life signs, while appearing conventionally biological, indicate remarkably stable neural architecture under duress. They are exhibiting zero spikes in adrenaline or cortisol levels. They are not afraid. The human delegation halted precisely 10 meters from the prepared hegemonic observation barrier, a shimmering wall of modulated energy designed to contain any biological contaminants or sudden energy spikes. One of the three figures, marginally taller than the others, raised a manipulator, a five-fingered appendage, and performed a series of precise, measured gestures in the direction of the observation barrier, gestures that were entirely non-standard but conveyed unmistakable intent. Then the universal translator matrices, primed with every known linguistic variable, chimed almost simultaneously, locking onto the modulated electromagnetic signature emanating from the lead human. The resulting translation was overlaid onto the chamber's primary display, dry, synthesized, perfectly neutral. We greet the custodians of this region in peace. We are the representatives of the Terran Alliance. We offer explanation, not capitulation. The starkness of the declaration, devoid of expected deference or excessive formality, caused a ripple of discontent among the assembled sovereigns. Xylos's irritation was almost audible. Explanation! They demand explanation for our sovereignty. Cathar raised his hand again, the gesture silencing the entire chamber save for the synthesized voice emanating from the distant docking bay. Silence! They have established a baseline of equality in address. Note the precision of the term Terran Alliance. They claim organized polity. Synthesist analyzed the phrasing. Is this aggression masked as protocol? Alara responded instantly, her voice vibrating with intellectual fervor. Arbiter, it is not masked. It is direct. It bypasses the usual diplomatic layers of deference. They present facts, identity, intent. They are treating us as an obstacle to be navigated, not a supreme authority to be petitioned. This is the behavior of a species that defines its own worth, rather than accepting a derived value from external powers. The lead human waited, exhibiting the infinite patience of a predator confident in its position. After 3 full cycles of oppressive silence, Cathar made his decision. Open a direct, secure channel. Address the lead representative. Synthesist Alara, conduct the initial communication. Frame our inquiry with absolute precision. Alara nodded, accepting the intellectual burden. Her voice, modulated to convey synthesized wisdom, projected across the immense distance to the docking bay. Designate Terran Alliance representative. We acknowledge your presence within hegemonic space. The trajectory of your arrival violated numerous established navigational protocols centuries in their formation. Before explanation can be rendered, we require context. By what authority do you navigate independent of the Universal Concordance Treaties? The human leader tilted its head slightly, a micro-expression that the hegemony's cultural databases flagged as contemplation, a waste of processing power in high-stakes encounters. The response, when it came, was delivered with the same unwavering neutrality. Authority is self-derived. We navigate by the right of discovery and necessity. The Concordance Treaties were not ratified by our civilization. We were, until the detection of your monitoring arrays, unaware of their existence. Our necessity dictated expansion. Our method was purely optimized for efficiency across the spatial gulf. Xylos erupted, the sound a sharp, aggressive hiss transmitted across the internal comms channel Cathar maintained with the conclave. Efficiency. They speak of efficiency while violating boundaries. Ask them about the energy signatures detected during their transit. Ask them how they bypassed the Kreller interdiction field, a barrier that has held back entire developing empires for millennia. Cathar filtered Xylos's outburst, rephrasing the core demand into the structured dialogue demanded by diplomacy. The nature of your propulsion system is a matter of immediate security concern. The bypass of established spatial stabilization fields is technologically unprecedented in our observational history. We require the principles underlying this transit capability. The human representative shifted its weight, and the 2 accompanying figures remained motionless sentinels. The response carried a hint of something. NG the hegemony's translators flagged as mild dismissal, though it was delivered without inflection. A transit method utilizes focused application of the strong nuclear force channeled through a localized, artificially sustained singularity field. The complexity lies not in the field generation, which is routine for our established capabilities, but in the shielding required to prevent catastrophic chronal drift during transit acceleration. To explain the physics adequately would require a baseline education in quantum mechanics that we suspect your current understanding may not encompass. A profound silence descended upon the grand nexus chamber. Even Xylos was momentarily stunned into quiescence. The hegemony possessed mastery over spatial manipulation, gravity lensing, and even localized temporal dilation for research purposes. They understood the strong nuclear force better than any species currently documented. But to engineer a sustained, localized singularity for propulsion, that was a concept relegated to the theoretical fringes of cosmological mathematics, considered too volatile, too dangerous to ever be practical. Cathar felt a cold dread seep into his carapace. If this was true, if they had harnessed forces that the hegemony deemed theoretical hazards, then their arrival was not an act of reckless trespass, but a calculated move by a civilization operating on a higher technological plateau than previously believed. Arbiter, Ilara whispered urgently across the internal link. Their statement, if accurate, suggests a technological gulf comparable to the distance between an insect and a stellar navigator. Their concept of routine is terrifyingly distant from ours. Cathar regained his composure, projecting calm where only rising uncertainty existed. He chose his next words with meticulous care, pivoting the conversation away from pure technology toward intent, seeking the ethical substrate. If your capabilities exceed the boundaries of our current comprehension, representative, then your intent must be understood with the greatest clarity. Why arrive here? Why present yourselves to a power structure you were previously unaware of? The human leader executed the gesture again, a deliberate invitation to continue the exchange. We did not arrive to challenge your structure, Arbiter. We arrived seeking specific resources, and perhaps more critically, seeking validation of a hypothesis concerning the stability of the local galactic cluster. Our initial reconnaissance detected anomalies in the background radiation patterns, disturbances inconsistent with standard stellar evolution or known dark matter fluctuations. We hypothesized that these fluctuations indicate the localized presence of a long-dormant, non-biological intelligence operating on a scale that transcends conventional observation. We sought clarity on these patterns. Your defensive response provided an accelerated opportunity for direct dialogue. This was the pivot, not territory, not conquest, but astrophysics, the search for the truly unknown. This was a goal compatible with the highest aspirations of the hegemony, yet delivered with a condescension that chafed against established hierarchy. They speak of a dormant intelligence, Cathar announced to the conclave, his voice regaining some of its customary authority. They frame themselves as fellow seekers of cosmological truth, yet they arrive bearing weapons systems that could dismantle our orbital defenses in hours if deployed offensively. Viceroy Xylos, the tactical priority must shift. We cannot afford to treat them as threats to be crushed, but as variables to be negotiated with. Synthesist Ilara, prepare a secure diplomatic staging area. We will welcome the delegation inside the Nexus. On my authority, all localized kinetic dampeners are to be temporarily lowered during their ingress. We demonstrate confidence by foregoing excessive defensiveness. Xylos bristled, his manipulators clenching. Arbiter, this is weakness codified. To lower the fields is to offer them the throat of the hegemony. They could deploy a weapon, detonate a localized field, and shatter this very chamber. And in doing so, Cathar responded, his tone dangerously level, they confirm the assessment that they are barbarians driven by impulse. If they choose that path, Viceroy, their technological superiority becomes irrelevant. They merely become another short-lived, self-destructive entity in the void. If they are rational, and their statements suggest deep calculation, they will recognize the gesture of trust and respond in kind. We gamble on their logic, Xylos, because the alternative is technological subjugation. The gamble was accepted by the sheer weight of Cathar's authority. Within the hour, the human delegation, led by the representative whose designation was translated as Commander Valerius, was ushered into a restricted annex of the Nexus station. a chamber deliberately scaled to feel expansive yet slightly overwhelming. The humans, clad in their functional, dull gray environmental suits, moved with an almost unsettling self-possession through the polished, reflective corridors designed to intimidate lesser species. Valeria stood now facing Cathar directly, separated only by a low, polished obsidian table, and the two accompanying humans stood flanking him like quiet, organic monuments. The hegemony's entire diplomatic corps, including Alara and a sullen Xylos, observed from recessed alcoves. Cathar began the formal greeting, a structured discourse on hegemonic history, stability, and the presumed necessity of order in a chaotic universe. Valerius listened, his posture unchanged. When Cathar concluded his lengthy exposition on the virtues of established hierarchy, Valerius simply leaned forward. Arbiter Cathar, your recitation of historical context is duly recorded. However, concepts such as established order and necessary hierarchy are constructs evolved to manage scarcity and internal conflict within a single evolutionary branch. Our civilization has, for many of our recent cycles, moved beyond such necessary constraints. We do not seek to dominate, we seek to understand the underlying structure of reality. Your defense grid, your political structure, these are defensive mechanisms against perceived threat, relics of a period where survival was the primary imperative. We are past that imperative. Cathar registered the clinical assessment of his entire civilization as relics. It was an insult delivered with the detached precision of a surgeon describing a tumor. And what, Commander Valerius, is the imperative of a species that has moved past survival? What drives the use of technology capable of traversing the gulf between stars in cycles that defy established physics? Valerius paused, and in that calculated hesitation, the sheer weight of human philosophy seemed to press into the chamber. Curiosity, Arbiter, pure, unadulterated epistemological drive. We have exhausted the known variables within our own observable universe. The universe, as perceived through our previous methodologies, had begun to feel finite. When we detected the gravitational harmonics inconsistent with your established stellar mapping, the signal you now recognize, we knew we had found the boundary condition. We seek the answer to the question, what lies beyond the perceived limits of physics? Alara finally spoke, her voice resonating with intellectual hunger, stepping partially out of the shadows of her alcove. The harmonic disturbance. We have modeled it as an emergent, non-causal phenomenon, a distortion implying an information flow so vast it warps the metric field itself. Are you suggesting this is not merely a phenomenon, but a signature, a controlled artifact? Valerius turned his gaze toward Alara, a flicker of what could only be described as collegial respect crossing his features. Synthesist Alara, your modeling is precise, if perhaps limited by your reliance on observable causality. We do not believe it is an artifact in the material sense. We believe it is a communication network utilizing the structural stresses of spacetime itself. A broadcast system left by a civilization that achieved, perhaps eons ago, a level of understanding where physical barriers were obsolete. A network designed for information exchange across cosmological distances. Xylos finally found his voice, injecting the brutal reality of the immediate situation. While you discuss ancient broadcasts, Commander, your vessels remain parked on our docking clamps. You possess a propulsion system that nullifies our strategic defense doctrine. If this network is your goal, why interact with us? Why not bypass us entirely? Valerius met Xylos' hostile gaze without flinching, a calmness that bordered on the sublime. Viceroy Xylos, we did not interact with you because we needed permission. We interacted because we required an audience capable of comprehending the context of the signal. Your civilization, the hegemony, occupies a strategically crucial nexus point within this sector. Your sensors, your communications infrastructure, your established network of observation. It is a pre-existing lattice of data collection that would have taken us centuries to replicate. We required localized, rapid access to your accumulated observational data regarding the harmonic distortion. We came to negotiate for that data, not to steal it. This was the first great reveal. Humans did not seek conquest. They sought high-level data aggregation, leveraging existing infrastructure rather than destroying it. It was organizational efficiency of an entirely different order. Cathar leaned back, the tension momentarily easing as he processed the implications. You wish to trade. You offer technology in exchange for localized astrophysical data. What do you offer that balances the equation? Your propulsion system alone is beyond our current theory. Eichel grasp. Valerius smiled, a slight upward curvature of the lips that the translators instantly recognized as a gesture of affirmation, not mockery. Arbiter, technology is merely the application of understood principles. We offer you understanding. We offer you the key to transcend the limitations you currently perceive. Our singularity drive is an application of fundamental laws, but the signal we track, the intelligence behind that structure, that knowledge is unique. Valerius signaled to one of his accompanying figures, who produced a small, sleek device, utterly featureless, composed of a dull, non-reflective metallic alloy unlike anything the hegemony utilized. The figure placed it gently on the obsidian table. This device, Valerius continued, is a demonstration unit. It contains the architectural schematics for a localized environmental stabilization field generator, the basis of our ship shielding. It requires a specific blend of rare isotopes, which we lack in sufficient quantity here, but the principles of field geometry are embedded within. Study it. It represents a quantum leap in energy containment and projection. We offer this as a guarantee of good faith and as the initial installment toward the data exchange. The air in the hegemony chamber crackled as the robotic arms of the analytical drones extended from the alcoves, taking detailed scans of the device. Alara watched the readings flood her private console, her composure finally breaking as she let out a low, reverent sound. Arbiter, the equations embedded in this structure. They are not just advanced, they demonstrate an elegant simplification of universal constants we believed immutable. This technology. It validates theories we discarded as elegant impossibilities. Cathar observed the human commander, seeking the flaw, the hidden dagger. Logic dictated that no species capable of this level of synthesis would offer such a gift without ensuring absolute strategic dominance. Commander, why offer such a profound strategic advantage freely? If we can replicate your shielding, our perceived vulnerability evaporates. You would lose your leverage. Valerius met his gaze, and in that moment the difference in philosophical underpinning became brutally clear. Arbiter, we do not operate on leverage derived from scarcity. If you can replicate the shielding, then you have advanced your civilization's fundamental knowledge base. That benefits us both, as the greater the collective understanding in this quadrant, the better prepared we will be to interface with the entity transmitting the signal. If you choose to use this knowledge for conflict against us, then our initial assessment of your species, as prone to internal conflict, will be confirmed, and we will withdraw immediately, leaving you to face the true unknown alone. Our goal is not control. It is the expansion of consciousness. This was the core revelation. Humanity's power was rooted not in aggression or acquisition, but in a transcendent, almost serene dedication to knowledge acquisition and self-improvement, coupled with an astonishing capacity for rapid technological synthesis. They were not arrogant. They were simply operating on a timescale and a philosophical framework where mutual elevation was the most efficient path forward. Cathar made the momentous decision, bypassing millennia of hegemonic paranoia. He activated the central chamber's primary communication array, linking directly with the monitoring station holding the Odyssey. Commander Valerius, Cathar announced, his voice carrying the weight of an empire shifting its tectonic plates. The demonstration unit has been provisionally accepted for immediate analysis. The hegemony concedes the necessity of collaboration regarding the emergent harmonic patterns. We will grant your delegation access to the sectorial observation archives. Synthesist Alara will oversee the data transfer and collaborate with your scientific cadres. Viceroy Xylos, the tactical posture is to shift from containment to integrated security detail. Treat the Terran delegation as honored guests and essential partners. Xylos's internal conflict was visible even in the slight rigidness of his posture, but the Arbiter's word was law. He offered a single, curt nod of acknowledgement. The agreement was sealed not with a treaty, but with a shared objective, deciphering the silent message echoing through the fabric of spacetime. The next 3 standard cycles were a blur of intense, unprecedented collaboration within the high-security research sectors of the Nexus Station. Hegemonic xenolinguists and astrophysicists, species who had spent lifetimes studying the slow decay of nebulae and the subtle gravitational whispers of dead stars, were suddenly confronted with the rapid-fire methodologies of the human scientific teams. The humans possessed an almost frightening ability to discard failed methodologies without emotional attachment, iterating solutions at a speed that left the hegemony analysts reeling. The human scientific team, though smaller than the corresponding hegemonic research cadre, operated with ruthless efficiency. They did not merely translate hegemonic data, they recontextualized it, viewing the hegemony's accumulated knowledge through the lens of their own established, yet currently hidden, baseline physics. Alara found herself working alongside a human specialist designated Dr. Lena Hansen, a specialist in theoretical applied mathematics. The contrast was stark. Alara relied on established, crystalline axioms. Hansen utilized fluid, adaptive models, treating the universe as a vast, malleable simulation. "Synthesist Alara," Dr. Hansen communicated during one late cycle, her voice calm despite the frantic activity surrounding them. "Your models of the distortion harmonics are exceptionally detailed, but they assume a linear propagation across the metric field. The signal is not propagating, it is resonating the field itself. Think of it less as a message traveling through space, and more as a standing wave maintained by a structure outside of our current dimensional perception." Alara processed this, adjusting the complex, multi-layered matrices on her console. A standing wave implies a transmitter of immense, perhaps infinite, power, or a structure maintaining coherence across distances far exceeding the observable universe. That violates every known conservation law. Conservation laws are merely observations of how energy behaves within localized reality bubbles, Hansen countered patiently, tapping a sequence onto her own portable interface, a wafer-thin sheet of complex circuitry that seemed to draw power from the ambient light. "We suspect this signal originates from a construct that operates by generating transient realities optimized for data storage. The signal is the decay signature of an ancient, massive computation. We do not believe we are receiving a message. We believe we are finding the remains of a universal library." The implications were staggering. A universal library implied not just knowledge, but the collective memory of a progenitor civilization, perhaps one that existed before the current expansion of the observable cosmos. Meanwhile, Xylos, relegated to the purely tactical role, watched Commander Valerius interact with the hegemonic security forces. Valerius never issued demands. He offered observations that subtly corrected tactical inefficiencies. He didn't command the security patrols. He provided them with superior threat modeling based on his understanding of their own cloaking frequencies. His presence, paradoxically, seemed to increase the effectiveness and calm of the hegemony personnel, stripping away the layers of protocol-driven caution. "See Viceroy," Valerius explained one afternoon while reviewing security deployment manifests. "Paranoia is an excellent defense against known threats, but against the unknown, paranoia only creates blind spots. Your guards are focused on detecting intrusion from external vectors. They are not focused on anticipating subtle systemic failure points within the station's primary power conduits, which, given their age and energy cycling, present a much more statistically probable risk." Xylos found himself nodding against his ingrained cultural programming. The humans were terrifyingly effective because they prioritized pure optimization over political posturing. After the exchange of the first phase, the analysis of the shielding schematics confirming human honesty, and the initial data dumps revealing the complex structure of the harmonic signal, Cathar summoned the conclave once more. The air in the Nexus chamber was different now. The fear was replaced by a profound, almost terrifying sense of opportunity. "The Terran Alliance has proven itself capable of honesty and technological synthesis beyond our immediate capacity," Cathar began, the tone of his voice shifting from defensive caution to strategic engagement. "They offer not submission, but partnership in the pursuit of ultimate knowledge. Viceroy Xylos, your assessment of their military capability remains unchanged, but your assessment of their intent must be revised." Xylos offered a clipped acknowledgement. "Arbiter, their military application remains a strategic imbalance. However, their immediate focus is not conquest. Their methodology suggests they view conflict as an inefficient use of resources best spent on understanding. I submit that a temporary strategic alliance for the purpose of deciphering this library is the most prudent path to preserving hegemonic stability." Alara rose, her crystalline structure shining brightly under the chamber light. "Arbiter, this is more than mere preservation. If the signal originates from a civilization that mastered space-time computation, The knowledge contained within that network could resolve the fundamental existential questions that plague advanced species. The limits of entropy, the nature of consciousness beyond biological substrate. This is the next evolutionary leap for the hegemony, delivered to our doorstep by a species we initially dismissed as reckless newcomers. Cathar looked at the primary projection, which now displayed a complex, swirling visualization of the harmonic resonance, a visualization enhanced by human algorithms that revealed intricate, repeating informational nodes. Commander Valerius, Cathar addressed the holographic link maintained with the human delegation, which was now working in the hegemony archives. The hegemony is prepared to commit significant intellectual and computational resources to this endeavor. We will dedicate the entirety of the 9th Sector observatories to correlating your findings with our deep scan historical records. We agree to the partnership. What is the next step in deciphering this communication? Valerius's image appeared, calm against the backdrop of the sprawling hegemony archives. The next step requires an immersion arbiter. The signal is not easily parsed through external sensors. It requires interfacing directly with the source of the resonance, the focal point where the harmonic intensity peaks. And where, Cathar inquired carefully, does this focal point lie? Valerius projected a new set of coordinates onto the chamber display. They pointed not into deep, unexplored space, but directly into the core of the hegemonic territory, deep within the ancient, protected zones bordering the core worlds. Territory the hegemony had assumed was stable for eons. The source, Valerius stated, his voice echoing with sudden gravity, is located approximately 5,000 light cycles into the uncharted regions behind the Veil Nebula. We estimate it is an artificial structure, immense beyond any scale we have previously conceived. We require hegemonic deep-range mapping data for navigation, as our singularity drive is optimized for rapid transit, not precise, sustained, low-energy maneuvering within dense gravitational fields. Furthermore, Arbiter, we must advise you. Based on the signal decay rate, the library is entering a critical operational phase. If we do not interface soon, the information cascade may conclude, and the entire structure will likely collapse into an inert, non-recoverable state. The alliance was forged, built upon the shared terror of missing the ultimate secret of the cosmos. The hegemony, accustomed to being the ultimate arbiters of order, was now willingly following the lead of a species they had nearly annihilated, drawn forward by the irresistible promise of knowledge. The joint exploratory mission was assembled with unprecedented haste. It comprised the fastest hegemonic mapping cruisers, vessels capable of surviving high-gravity wells, escorted by the 3 surprisingly resilient human vessels, now refitted with hegemonic energy conduits to augment their already formidable singularity drives. Cathar dispatched a small, highly trusted contingent of hegemonic diplomats and scientists aboard the lead human vessel, the Odyssey, to ensure fidelity of intent. The journey into the Veil Nebula proved to be a harrowing demonstration of the combined technological capabilities. The hegemony ships provided the stable, long-duration navigation grid, while the human drives provided the terrifying bursts of acceleration needed to punch through pockets of intense spatial distortion caused by the anomalous harmonics. They were bound together by necessity, their differing technologies interlocking in a symbiotic rhythm. As they approached the designated coordinates, the ambient light of space itself began to warp. The familiar constellations dissolved into smears of color, and the very concept of linear distance seemed to break down. Sensors screamed warnings about impossible gravitational gradients. And then they saw it. It did not resemble a constructed object. It was not a station, nor a ship, nor a planetoid. It was an absence, a meticulously ordered void in the structure of space. It was an impossibly vast, perfectly geometric distortion shaped like a colossal, multifaceted rhomboid, shimmering with light that seemed to originate from before the Big Bang. Colors the hegemony sensors struggled to categorize, falling outside the visible or detectable electromagnetic spectrums. It was larger than any star system the hegemony had ever charted. Analysis, Cathar commanded from the Odyssey, his voice tight with awe, speaking directly to Alara, who was monitoring the external scanners. What are we observing? Alara's synthesized voice was strained, carrying a note of existential vertigo. Arbiter, it is not absorbing matter or energy, it is reorganizing it, The external shell, the geometric faces, are maintained by localized pocket universes, each operating under slightly different physical constants, all harmonically tuned to maintain the overall structure. The scale defies comprehension. This is not a library, this is a constructed dimension. Valerius, standing beside Alara, pointed toward the center of the colossal structure, where the light seemed most concentrated and most stable. That is the nexus point, the core computation engine. If the signal is a broadcast, that is the transmitter, maintained by the organized decay of the surrounding metric. The difficulty of approach was immense. The structure imposed subtle, but absolute, rules on the space immediately surrounding it. Hegemonic navigation protocols failed immediately. Their reliance on established gravitational constants made their maneuvering systems unpredictable near the structure's influence. "We have to relinquish control to the Odyssey," Valerius stated firmly, turning to Cathar. "Our singularity drives operate by bending reality to our will. They are inherently more adaptable to non-standard metric fields. We must navigate the final approach using human methodology, or we will be torn apart by the competing gravitational stresses." Cathar did not hesitate. The moment of truth had arrived, where abstract philosophy yielded to imminent action. "Commander, the approach is yours. Hegemony navigators will assist under your direct command, focusing solely on relaying sensor data and maintaining power allocation as directed." For the next agonizing passage of time, the human vessels, guided by Valerius and his team, performed a dance of impossible precision. They did not move through space. They seemed to anticipate the metric distortions, slipping through transient zones of stability, their hull plates absorbing and dissipating energies that would have vaporized hegemonic cruisers. They guided the larger hegemony escorts like shepherds guiding colossal, cumbersome beasts through a razor-wire maze. Finally, they reached a stable docking zone on one of the massive, crystalline faces of the rhomboid structure. The docking clamps engaged with a resonant thrum that vibrated through every molecule of the hegemony vessels. The second contact was different. When the ramp of the Odyssey descended this time, it revealed not a controlled environment, but an exterior surface of the structure itself. A vast plane of shimmering, complex geometry that seemed to shift under observation. The environment was breathable, a perfect match for both hegemony and human requirements, a deliberate courtesy from the ancient architects. Valerius turned to Cathar, his expression unreadable. "Arbiter, we are now entering the data matrix. We are in the hallway of the library. The knowledge here is structured not by language, but by experiential congruence. You must trust your scientific cadre completely. Synthesist Alara and your experts will be the interface between our understanding and the hegemony's accumulated history." They proceeded, a joint expedition composed of the best minds of two vastly different civilizations, stepping onto the remnants of a consciousness that spanned epochs. Inside, the library was a symphony of silent information flow. They did not see scrolling text or data crystals. Instead, they saw patterns of light and resonance that, when viewed through the specialized interpretive lenses provided by the humans, translated directly into complex, complete data sets, histories, scientific formulae, philosophical constructs, and cosmological maps. Alara was overwhelmed. Within moments of interfacing her console with the library's ambient resonance field, data flooded her systems. It was not overwhelming. It was perfectly organized, categorized by inherent relevance. "Arbiter," Alara breathed, tears of light forming at the edges of her optical sensors. "It is not just data. It is context. It shows the progression of their science, the collapse of their biological forms, the evolution of their collective intelligence into pure information architecture. They became a self-sustaining computation dedicated to mapping the remaining potential of the universe." The human scientists, meanwhile, were focused on accessing the most critical files, the ones pertaining to the anomalous gravitational harmonics that had drawn them there. Hours passed in this timeless space. Xylos, standing guard with a small security detail, watched the alien structures around him, the silent testament to a power that had voluntarily transcended physical form, and felt his strategic worldview shatter. His belief in kinetic superiority as the ultimate guarantor of peace was rendered moot by the existence of this ancient, peaceful force. Then Valerius let out a sharp intake of breath, the human analog for profound shock. He stepped away from the central interface point, beckoning Cathar and Alara toward a specific projection node that had just activated. Arbiter synthesist, we have found the primary focus of the signal. It is not a generic library of universal constants. It is a warning, a dispatch mechanism. The node projected a schematic visualization. It was a map not of the local cluster, but of the entire known galaxy, overlaid with pathways of energy transfer that were profoundly disturbing. These pathways indicated massive, systematic energy siphoning operations occurring across countless sectors, far beyond the hegemony's sphere of influence and far predating any documented civilization. These paths, Alara analyzed rapidly, integrating the human-provided contextual interpretation, they are drawing energy from the cores of developing stars, not for propulsion, but for sustained maintenance of an immense, concealed structure. A structure that occupies the very fabric of intergalactic space, hidden by utilizing the background radiation noise as camouflage. The signal we detected, Valerius continued, his voice grave, was not a passive broadcast. It was an automated alarm triggered when the structure's energy draw reached a critical threshold, indicating that the dominant local power, the hegemony, was sufficiently advanced to detect the anomaly. The library was built by the predecessors who fled this entity. Cathar felt the cold dread return, infinitely colder than before. The hegemony had been arrogant, focused on internal disputes and peripheral policing, convinced they were the pinnacle of local order. They had stumbled upon the first line of defense against something vast, ancient, and inherently hostile to complex life. The entity, Cathar demanded, his voice barely a whisper. What is its nature? Valerius accessed the final, most heavily encrypted file of the library, a file that required a confluence of hegemonic observational data and human predictive modeling to even partially decrypt. The result was a visual representation, a vast, interlocking network of non-biological constructs, moving slowly but inexorably across the galactic void, not following trajectories, but weaving the space between stellar nurseries, consuming energy at rates that defied stellar lifetime estimations. We call it the Great Assemblage, Valerius explained, the word sounding alien on his tongue. The library's creators defined it as the universal scourge. It does not seek territory or subjugation. It seeks thermodynamic efficiency. It consumes organized energy fields, stars, complex chemical reactions, life, to maintain its own structure and continue its slow, methodical traversal. It is a self-perpetuating machine whose only purpose is its own endless maintenance by consuming all available complexity. It is the ultimate predator of order. Alara stared at the display, her millennia of philosophical study collapsing under the weight of this terrifyingly simple concept. They consume life not for malice, but for fuel efficiency. We are not an enemy to be defeated. We are a resource to be harvested. Precisely, Valerius confirmed. And the hegemony's sophisticated sensor network, your mastery of gravitational lensing, the very energy your civilization pours into maintaining your order, it has only made you visible to the scourge sooner. The library was built to warn anyone who reached this level of awareness. The strategic realization hit Cathar with the force of a supernova. Their petty territorial disputes, their long cycles of stagnant governance, had been precisely what kept them under the radar of this cosmic harvester. The moment humanity had thrust the hegemony into the forefront of advanced detection, by breaching the outer reach, they had inadvertently triggered the alarm. Why did you not warn us through conventional means? Cathar asked, his voice tight with the betrayal of perceived negligence, despite his newfound respect for their logic. Valerius's expression settled into one of deep, profound sorrow, a rare display from the usually unflappable commander. Arbiter, we discovered the existence of the scourge in our own deep theoretical modeling shortly after achieving stable singularity propulsion. We have been preparing for this confrontation for nearly a century of our local time. We knew we could not defeat it alone. We knew we needed a major stabilizing influence in the sector, a power capable of coordinating defense on a massive scale. We needed the hegemony. But we also knew that showing up unannounced, demanding compliance against an enemy the hegemony couldn't even perceive, would have resulted in immediate hegemonic military mobilization against us as the greater threat. He met Cathar's gaze directly, the connection between the two leaders suddenly absolute, stripped bare of political artifice. We had to arrive as an intrusion, Arbiter. We had to force you to analyze our capabilities and our data under maximum pressure. We had to demonstrate our technology, prove our sincerity, and force the alliance before the warning was fully understood. Had we transmitted the full extent of the threat before establishing mutual trust, your internal political mechanisms would have spent decades debating the validity of the threat while the scourge advanced. We sacrificed tactical surprise against you to ensure strategic surprise against the true enemy. Cathar looked across the vast chamber at the assembled sovereigns. Xylos stood rigid, his strategic mind grappling with an enemy that could not be defeated by mere kinetic projection, an enemy that required absolute unity. Ilara was already compiling the necessary data streams for immediate mass dissemination across hegemonic scientific nodes, driven by the urgency of the library's data. The realization was stark. Humanity, in its seemingly reckless surge toward the frontier, had not been driven by simple expansion, but by a desperate, calculated necessity to find allies before being consumed. Their initial arrogance was merely the necessary performance required to break through layers of political inertia. "The warning is understood," Cathar stated, his voice regaining the depth of command, now focused on a singular, unifying purpose. He addressed the entire chamber, his decision echoing through the ancient stone. "The hegemony recognizes the existential nature of the Great Assemblage. We accept the assessment of the Terran Alliance. Viceroy Xylos, initiate the mobilization protocols for the First and Second Defense Fleets. We will reroute power allocation from all non-essential infrastructure to defensive field generation immediately. Synthesis Lara, you will coordinate all available analytical power to derive counter-algorithms against the Scourge's energy siphoning fields, utilizing the library's provided framework." He then turned back to Valerius, extending a manipulator across the obsidian table, not in a gesture of submission but of shared destiny. "Commander Valerius, you have brought us the truth at great risk to your own people. The hegemony pledges its full industrial and military capacity to repel this scourge. We will unify the sector under a singular strategic command. How do we strike the first blow?" Valerius accepted the contact, his grip firm and warm against the cold chitin of the Arbiter. "Arbiter, the library holds one final, crucial piece of information. The creators of this structure did not simply flee. They left behind a defense mechanism, a key designed to disrupt the Assembly's coordination matrix, but only if deployed with precise timing against the nexus point during a specific phase of its energy cycle. We require the hegemony's long-range mapping expertise to pinpoint the precise entry vectors for deployment, and the kinetic power of your main fleets to deliver the payload." He paused, allowing the enormity of the coming conflict to settle. "The alignment window for this disruption mechanism occurs in 72 standard cycles. We move now, not as two civilizations cautiously negotiating terms, but as one, fighting for the right to exist in a cosmos that others have already claimed." The final vision projected in the chamber was not of the beautiful, orderly crystalline arches of the Nexus, nor the imposing fleets of the hegemony, nor the utilitarian vessels of humanity. It was the image provided by the library, the great assemblage, a silent, geometric glacier of consumption, advancing slowly through the dark, unaware that its perfect camouflage had been pierced, and that the petty, squabbling entities it sought to harvest had finally found a reason to cooperate. The age of hegemonic dominance was over. The age of desperate, unified survival had begun, spearheaded by the unexpected, relentless logic of the species from the volatile blue world.